Aloha, this is Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I am interviewing Paul Constance, the writer, and Fred Harper, the artist. They are the creative team of Snelson, Comedy is Dying. It is a 5-part limited series from Ahoy Comics. Issue number 3 will be coming out, or depending on when you listen to this episode, it'll be out on October 13th. Now, before we begin, today is Thursday, September 30th. It is International Podcast Day, and I didn't realize that.
Congratulations.
All right. How are you guys doing today?
Very good. How are you?
Doing good.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha. This is Paul.
Yes.
So you can keep track of our voices.
All right.
Yes.
Now, before we start the interview, I just want to go over some of the history. So, Paul, he writes journalism, criticism, essay, and comic books. You know, his writings have appeared in BuzzFeed, the LA Times, the New York Observer, Business Insider, IO9, and the Seattle Times, to name a few. He works full-time for Civic Ventures. And Paul, do you want to explain what that is a little bit more?
Yeah, it's a kind of a think tank based out of Seattle. So I do a lot of political messaging. I do ghostwriting of editorials. I do some speech writing, things like that. We're very interested in raising wages. We were big supporters of the $15 minimum wage in Seattle back when people called that a crackpot thing to do. Gun responsibility, stuff like that. So I do a lot of political writing in the sort of progressive space.
And then also, you're also a co-founder of the award-winning Seattle Review of Books.
Right. Yes, that's a site that I founded a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've done a lot of book reviewing in my time, and I really enjoyed that and wanted to host a space on the internet where people could do more literary criticism.
And then I'm going to say, I know listeners, I know this is an audio podcast, but I love Paul's bookshelf. It's full of books.
Thanks. Yeah, this
It
is. It's all custom. My wife actually built it for me when we moved in here. So it actually wraps around all the corners of the room, which I won't show you because the rest of the room is a super fun site. But it's really magnificent to have all of my books in one place, and they're all alphabetized by author, and I feel so happy when I walk in and look at these shelves. So.
I understand. I'm going off the cuff, Paul. You must have stopped at Powell's bookstore, correct?
I have been to Powell's bookstore. Yeah, I was very excited the last time I went to Powell's right before the pandemic, and I saw they had my book Planet of the Nerds on the shelf, and I signed copies, and it was very exciting. I worked in bookstores for most of my life. I worked at Borders back when that was a thing, and I worked at Elliott Bay Book Company, which is sort of Seattle's version of Powell's. It's not nearly as big, but it's sort of a storied. Oh God, no pun intended. Storied old bookstore is what I was going to say. And I swear to God, I'm sorry.
But I have to say, me and my wife, oh God, I think it was 10 years ago, we went to, now correct me if I'm wrong, Powell's is in Portland? Is that correct?
Portland, Oregon, yep.
Okay, because when we went to Powell's, it's like, oh my God.
If you haven't been, it's a city block. It's a square city block of books, and it's a huge bookstore. It's new and used. It's an independently owned bookstore, and you can lose whole days there. I have lost whole days there. Sometimes I'll go down. Portland's about a 3-hour drive south, and I'll just go down there. I've spent like three days there continuously, and I could spend more. It's really amazing.
All right. Sorry, listeners. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. Okay, so Paul has also written for Ahoy Comics, Planet of the Nerds, and as Paul mentioned, it's at Paul's bookstore. You can pick it up at your local comic shop, and it's already in trade paperback, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And then is it still option for Paramount Plus? Is that the
Paramount Players? Yeah, they're a division of Paramount, and they optioned it for a movie, and I'm not allowed to talk about anything more than that. But they did do that, and I'm very excited about it.
Okay. And then also, I have to point out, because I saw one of the covers, it was done by Hawaii's own artist, David Nakayama. And I was like, yeah.
He did the first two covers for Planet of the Nerds, and he's I mean, he's an amazing artist. I'm really glad to see him. You know, he's really taken off at Marvel. He's I think almost exclusively doing Marvel covers now.
Yeah.
And he's just the sweetest guy too. Like, I got to meet him at Emerald City Comic Con, and he was just the nicest human being. I was really excited to see that, and he was super stoked about working on Planet of the Nerds, and yeah, just fantastic. I didn't realize he was Hawaiian, actually. So 1 point in your favor.
All right. So I'm gonna finish up. So okay, on Paul's website, paulconstance.com, you can sample some of his writings, such as Books Without Borders, My Life at the World's Dumbest Bookstore Chain. And the other, I guess like an article, is The Conspicuous Consumption: How I Became the Sort of Person Who Can Eat 23 spring rolls in 2 minutes. Now, I'm leading to this. I've already talked to Paul about this. Now, if you follow him on Twitter, one of his taglines is, "I'm a political writer." Now, guys, I'm joking around. I told Paul I was joking around with this, but more importantly, he is the winner of the Pioneer Square Amateur No Hand Pie Eating Contest. He ate 2.5 cherry pies in 2 minutes. Paul, you want to add
no hands?
To that? No hands. I'm sorry.
No hands. Yeah, no, and I'm also the 2009 International District Spring Roll Eating Champion. That was when I ate 23 spring rolls in 2 minutes. And I've officially retired from competitive eating, but it was a lot of fun when I did it. And I got very competitive, and I'm not a sports guy, but it was very scary how much I wanted to win that. I was, and I did, and I went out on top. So.
And now Fred, so listeners, for Fred, his background is he attended Columbus College of Arts and Design on a scholarship, and he graduated with a BFA in painting. Now, Fred also worked at an amusement park during his college years as a character artist. Now, quote, I got this from his website: "I am probably still cursed to this day by the ones that had braces." You want to add anything to that, Fred?
Yeah, and the people with freckles, because they didn't like me either, because well, for one thing, when I drew little girls that had braces, I would make train noises. I'd be like, choo choo, and they'd be like, "What is he doing?" And then they'd see that I had drawn the braces coming out of their mouth, like train tracks, going around their head, and then going back into their mouth sometimes. Sometimes just going off into space. And then the people with freckles, I would say, "I'm going to play connect the dots." After peppering the board, I would exaggerate how many freckles I'm giving them. I just pound the board because they couldn't see what I was drawing. And I would pound the board for like a minute, and they would be like, "What is he doing?" I'm like, "These are your freckles." And then I'm going to play connect the dots now. You want me to number them, And so, yeah, I had a couple of, I probably have some people that don't like me still. And, so they, but they were, it was all in fun. At least I thought so.
I'm going to continue on, Fred. Fred has also done editorial illustrations for magazines like the New York, for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Sports Illustrated, and Playboy. One of Fred's noted works was the Joe Bonham Project. Now, the information I got from the Wikipedia is its purpose is to portray the reality of war to the public with art that portrays the human consequences of war. Fred, I'm going to ask you, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it was very riveting and powerful experience to go through with a bunch of fellow illustrators from the Society of Illustrators in New York. We would take trips to various veteran hospitals. We went to Walter Reed a couple of times in Bethesda, Maryland, and drew soldiers that had recently lost a leg or both legs in some cases due to landmines and stuff. And while they're recovering, we'd ask permission to draw them in their hospital room, and we would talk to them while we drew them, and then we collected our works after a year or two of this. And but yeah, we had a bunch of stories, and just talking to them, I'm like, yeah, war's a bad thing. That's my I kind of had that idea before I went in, but you definitely go, here's a 20-year-old kid who goes, he's missing half his leg, and I go, here's the comic book tie-in. I'm like, so he's describing what happened. I stepped on a mine, temporarily blacked out, woke up to seeing his foot on the other, like about a couple of feet away. And he's like, well, that wasn't good. And he's like this kid from like Oklahoma. He's talking really kind of casual and slow about it, eating a bowl of cereal, watching cartoons on his thing. And then he goes, it kind of felt like the Hulk was pinching my leg. And I was like, wow, he's explaining this horrible experience in cartoon terms, and I'm like, this is insane, that we even have war, so yeah, that was and I'm like, this is why am I here? I'm like, this dude just like blew up his leg, and he couldn't wait to go back. He's like, yeah, I think I can get like, an aesthetic. They've gotten really good at giving me these aesthetics, and I can at least drive a truck, because I want to go back. And I was like, I mean, I guess you've made a commitment, like, you still got one good leg left, I guess, it's, geez, so anyway, that was it was a really good experience. On the lighter side of things, I do currently do covers for the Week magazine, if anybody gets the Week. So I do 2 a month for them. So it's called the Week, and it's a weekly. Go figure. Anyway.
And then now, Fred, you also worked as a freelancer for Marvel. You worked on some of the, now correct me if I'm wrong, you worked on some of the comic books in the 90s, like Marvel Comics Presents Savage Sword of Conan, and you're mentioning that you did some inking for a Doctor Strange comic book. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was right around the Midnight Suns thing, whenever that was. It was tying in with Marvel Comics Presents, because I did the Ghost Rider story, and it was I think I did a lot of a couple of 2099 things, and Joey Cavalieri was at main editor at Marvel at that point. I think he's at DC now, or was. So it was a different time.
And then also too, you've also done some work for DC, as you mentioned to me earlier, before we started, was you did a two-page artwork for Doom Patrol, and then you also did some work on Animal Man. Is that correct?
Yes, the last 11 issues. Yeah.
And then also, like I said, and I checked out your website, fredharper.com, and under the print section, I saw the Mars Attack print. I love that print. It's great. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, I have all the originals. I did 35 cards for the last card set that came out for Topps. And I have all the originals that are you can see the original scan, and then see how it printed. next to it, and they're all for sale. So just gotta let me know which one, and the ones that are left, you're welcome to. So.
Now, Paul and Fred, did I miss anything? Did you guys want to add anything else to your work history?
No. I think that covers it for me, for sure.
Oh yeah, I don't want to bore you with all the other parts. That I mean, I used to strip. No,
I was a mall Easter bunny.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's true.
Yes, I read that. Paul was like, "Oh,
there you go."
You had a long, hard. You came a long way.
I mean, when I was growing up, you would read all these paperbacks, and on the back, the author was a longshoreman, and he was a bodyguard for a Hollywood star or whatever. And so I was trying to gather those experiences as I was starting out my writing career.
Yeah, like the best writers, man. They've done some stuff.
Exactly. Ernest Hemingway did his time in the Easter Bunny outfit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, his was war, but it's the same.
Right.
Thing.
Yeah,
metaphorically.
Yeah.
Same.
He wore it like a bunny rabbit suit. Yeah, it was. So.
And then, Fred, what about how? I know I'm kind of jumping a little ahead, but what influenced you to become an artist or a painter, I should say?
I can't do anything else. Yeah, I'm really. I think I realized the power of art when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I was like every kid in high school. I'm too much acne, and no dates. I could draw, and I saw this girl. It was I was probably 11th grade, and she was like the popular girl that with all the kids that picked on me, and they he's the weird kid, so she fell asleep next to me in homeroom and was drooling on her books, and I did my best work that day. I drew her, and then I was very proud of this, and my friend who was older than me was like, "Hey, can I borrow that?" I didn't realize he didn't like this girl, and so he took the picture,
yes,
taped it up, wrote "whore" under it, and then taped it in the boys' room or girls' room. I forget which one.
Uh-huh.
All of a sudden, half the school wanted to kill me, and I'm like, "Wow, art is really powerful," So I had half the football team trying to tackle me and drag me downstairs, and it was starting to get serious, but I escaped and realized I'm going to be an artist when I grow up.
In some ways that story is kind of the magic of comics, right? Because you drew a picture, but it wasn't until this person wrote the slur on it that really turned it into comics. And so that's your.
It's the narrative, story. Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to continue on. Now, before we really get into the interview, I want to give a big mahalo to Hannah Bahedri of Superfan Promotion for arranging this interview. Hannah, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And I'm going to say this, Hannah, you are a lifesaver. So thank you very much. Paul and Fred, do you want to add anything to this?
Oh no, Hannah's amazing. I mean, everybody at Superfan is amazing. They really care about the books. They they actually read the books, which I think isn't the case in all PR, based on my experience as a book critic. And they really care about the comics, and they do a great job getting it out there, and making sure that things get noticed. So she's spectacular.
I second that. Yes, and also thank you to Hart Seeley for making those paychecks show up right immediately. I've never had that experience with comics. They just you turn it in and you're like, well, maybe I'll get paid next month or, something. And, but yeah, it's really, no, they've been really fun and friendly, at Ahoy. And, yeah.
All right. Now, I kind of already mentioned about, your guys' websites. Do you guys want to promote your other social media platforms? Like, where can people find you on Twitter or?
I'm at Paul Constant on Twitter. My website is Paul Constant. It's CONSTANT, like the mathematical expression. I have a Facebook account, but I haven't been on it in years because they're evil. So yeah, just Twitter and my website. Those are the ways to find me.
And what about you, Fred?
I'm Dead Red Fred on Twitter and Instagram, and just Fred Harper and Fred Harper Art on Facebook. I check that once a year at least, and so yeah. So it's mostly the Instagram and Twitter though.
Okay.
But yeah, Dead Red Fred, and you already mentioned my website. Fred Harper. There's also F Harper, which is the fine art site, and that has more of my paintings than not so much illustration.
Okay.
Same prints to.
Okay. All right. So where did you guys grow up?
Fred, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. I grew up Western Pennsylvania, Ohio region. And that's where I did the amusement park caricatures, and I did, and went to college there, and then I moved to New York City as soon as I could. And around 20, I was 23. I got lined up a job and painted murals until I got into comics. So yeah, it was mostly Ohio and then New York. That's where I learned to be an adult.
And I was born and raised in Maine, a town called Buxton, which is only famous as the place where Morgan Freeman buries the gold at the end of the Shawshank Redemption. And small town. And then I moved to Boston for a while, and then I moved to Seattle in 2000, and I've been here ever since. It's the longest I've ever lived in a place. I think I'm a Seattleite for life.
Right on. You make Seattle sound really nice, by the way.
I really do like Seattle. I mean, I love New York. I toyed with living in New York City, but I like the nature, and I like the West Coast more than the East Coast. I'm just by nature more of a Tupac than a Biggie, I guess.
Very good.
What I'll have Paul start off first, then you, Fred. What was your first comic that you read?
The first comic that I read, there was this company called Bonanza Books that did collections of old comics. They had a Superman one, and it covered Superman from the 30s to the 70s. And it was just a collection. It was a bound book. And so it just had a wide array of Superman comics from all over. And then Charlie Brown comic strip collections. I think those two were sort of together the first experience I had with comics. My first reading experience too. I taught myself how to read basically on comic books in my basement growing up, because I wanted to find out what was in the word bubbles, So it was definitely my first experience.
And then what about you, Fred?
I did I was like, I think I was 9 or 10, and the older kids were into Fantastic Four in my neighborhood, and we had a clubhouse, and everybody fancied themselves an artist, so we each took a character and drew that onto the clubhouse plywood that we had scarfed from some salvaged from something. And yeah, it was like I didn't know how to paint, but I managed to draw the Human Torch, because that was the only one left by the time I got there, and so they always made fun of me, of course, for being the Human Torch. They're like, he's the gay one. You know, I was like, really? You know, I was like, I'm like 10. You know, like, you know, so yeah, it was the 70s. What are you gonna say? You know, so. But yeah, that was like my, you know, that, and then I got into Savage Sword, Conan, because I really liked the artwork, and you know, I didn't know. You know, then later on, I got more into the underground comics because of the people, the artists that I started meeting. I met a guy that was really into Zap comics, and he was also really into psychedelic drugs, apparently. So so I didn't realize, like, I was totally straight. Like, I didn't drink or do any drugs all through high school, but apparently my best friends were always on LSD. So, you know, and I was like, wow, okay, that explains why you made the things you made. And I was trying to do that too, but I was totally straight, sober, doing it, you know, going, and so I had a different approach to it that I realized. And yeah, that was my, you know, but I totally enjoyed the weird stories. So yeah. And that kind of led to that. I feel like the Marvel and DC stories were interruptions to get to the Snelson story, you know, because like Snelson's the kind of story I really actually want to tell, you know, as opposed to you know, a guy in tights beating people up, you know, or, you know, or on fire beating people up. So yeah.
And then Drew, the Coles of Comics for Fun and Profit, submitted this question. Do you guys remember what was your first LCS you guys visited? I'll let.
Wow. I think it was Casablanca Comics in Maine, which I think there still might be a couple of those, actually. Yeah, that was my first one. It was a good comic book store, and because I always got my comics at the local drugstore on the spinner rack, you know, so I would miss issues, and I get like the next month, and then I get the month previous by accident and things like that, and then I watch them in a comic book store, and that was when I first got into like Fantagraphics books and things like that. Was through my local comic book store. It was like mind blowing. I think for me.
Yeah, my first comic book store was really the Stop and Go convenience store that had the little rack, you know, the spin rack as well. And you know, my mother would get me you know, Fantastic Four and Savage Sword, or not Savage Sword, it was the I think they had another version of Conan that she would get at that time, and stick it, you know, I'd get it for Christmas presents, you know. And then my first real store I walked into wasn't until New York City, and I went into Forbidden Planet, and that was like a blast, you know. I'm like, wow, this is like total, like, you know, crazy. And you know, because I hadn't, you know, I just wanted to be an illustrator or painter when I came to New York. I didn't have a specific, I want to be a comic book artist, you know. And so yeah, because like I just happened to wander into the New York Comic Con when it was at the Pennsylvania Hotel in like probably 1991 or 92. And I just, you know, nobody knew who George Pratt was, and there's this guy like pushing Enemy Aces, and nobody. I'm like, wow, you can paint comics? How cool is that? You know. And the same with Jeffrey Jones. Like nobody was talking to Jeff Jones, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at these brilliant paintings. You know, this is like Egon Schiele, just like the next version, you know. And I was like, this guy is amazing, and why isn't anybody just mobbing him? You know, it was like, you know, but there was all these other comic book stores that had brought their stuff to sell there, and I'm like, wow, I hadn't even thought about going to a comic book store. And after that, I certainly did.
Wow, that's pretty cool that you kind of sort of watered into the New York Comic Con.
That's why I like New York. You just, you know, I can be so lazy and just discover cool things.
Yeah, and then for both you guys, how did you guys break into comics? You know,
Well, for me, it was I was a writer at an alt weekly here called The Stranger for a few years, and it just so happened that Tom Pyre, who was the editor of Doom Patrol back in the day, and he was an editor at Vertigo, and an amazing comics writer in his own right. He lived out here in Seattle for a while, and he reached out to me and said he liked some of my writing at the paper, and I was a huge fan of his, and so we just we kept in touch a little bit, and then he reached out to me and a few years ago and said, hey, I'm starting this company with my friend Hart Seelig, and I wanted to know if you knew any artists and writers in Seattle who you thought deserved attention, and I wondered if you had any pitches. And I pitched him Planet of the Nerds, which was an idea I'd had for a long time, and they took it right away, and then got me to work writing backup stories for Ahoy, to sort of get used to the form again. I'd done a lot of mini comics with friends in high school and things like that. And I'm sure you could still find some at thrift stores in Seattle. Every once in a while, somebody will say, hey, we found this one. And it's pretty embarrassing, but they're up there. And so, yeah, I'd had a little bit of experience, but Tom really sort of helped me relearn the medium. He's a great teacher. And so, yeah, I've been with Ahoy ever since. I really enjoy it.
And what about you, Fred?
Oh, geez. How I got into it was a little more desperation, because I had the previously mentioned shitty job. I was like, I was making so little money. I was slowly going into debt, in New York City, and I just happened to meet Mark Teixeira, who's was doing Ghost Rider at the time, and he was blowing up at Marvel, and I didn't realize how close Marvel was to, how easy it was to get to in the city. So I'd go there on my lunch breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Mark would get me in the door, and I'd run around to all the editors and go, hey, do you like this? Do you like this? And he goes, yeah, you should just get something, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm going to just walk around. And he'd introduced me to a couple people, but he was always treading around, carefully, because he's like, I don't want to piss anybody off, and be good, be cool, or I'll never take you in here again, and I'm like, okay, and I just, I went in there. I just happened to be in the office. I got in at Savage Sword, and I was doing little pinups, and then as I was turning something in, came into the editor. He's got his head in his hands, and just frustrated, and I'm like, oh, is this bad time? And he goes, how would you like to do Marvel Comics Presents? And I was like, yeah, sure. By then I was in New York long enough to say yes to everything and figure out how to do it later. So because I had never inked a comic book before. I wasn't really that familiar with the medium. I was just like, I was happy doing pinups, and then the artist was about like 8 weeks behind schedule on the book, so he just had to find somebody else, and I don't know who it was, so I don't like I sorry if you're listening, I don't but I ended up like just doing it for the next 2 years. It was just really fun to learn it, and I was doing it every, I turned in like 8 pages every week of finishes. And at the same time, I got a job at Triumphant Comics. They I don't know how I got there. It got on their radar, but like I ended up getting work from them the same week I got work from Marvel. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So I was penciling a book, and then I was doing finishes for Marvel, and all of a sudden my income tripled.
Mhm.
So I was like, this is great, you know. And then being friends with Mark Teixeira,
Mhm.
you know, he would get like these giant royalty checks,
Mhm.
you know, for working on, you know, Marvel, or working on a Ghost Rider, and then X-Men and all
Mhm.
that stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm in the right business now, you know, because I could, you know, I mean, coming from $10 an hour to like suddenly I was making enough to pay rent and Andy, you know, it was great to be able to do both. And so yeah, I was like, I got to do this more. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was really nice.
So I'm sorry, I'm going off the cuff. So how did you meet Mark Teixeira? I mean,
Oh, that was just a
time.
weird time of my life, because I was in a I just gotten married, and I was going to this church, you know, and it's the only reason I got married, really. It's like, because this girl that I was like, no, I'm in love with you, I'm gonna, you know, I don't care about, you know, I'll get in this church, you know. Even it was a cult, basically, I think. And because of it, though, it gave me a network of nice people
Mhm.
when I moved to New York, that showed me around.
Yes.
And because I was one of the few artists, they were like, well, you got to meet Mark, he's an artist too, you know. And I'm like, you know, so they threw all the artists in one little spot, and he and I hit it off. So, you know, yeah, we had a blast, you know, just chilling. And yeah, I've known him since probably 91 or 92.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really cool. And yeah, and he's been like, we've been buddies ever since. So
I want to say, especially for him to go, come on, let's go to Marvel office right now, because I don't think
oh yeah,
people can do that nowadays.
Yeah,
no, I
yeah. Don't
mean,
try this at home, kids.
Yeah,
no, yeah,
yeah.
it was definitely
You'll get
a
arrested.
weird, yeah, it was definitely a weird like thing, you know. Like I know, yeah, it was like I don't know how I would start out in comics now, you know.
Uh-huh.
Like I don't, you know, I don't know how you would get a Marvel job, you know.
Mhm.
I never had an agent. I never, you know, I was like, I don't know, I just happened to bump into the right person,
Yeah.
talk to the right person, and there's all these little random things that happen to you along your life, that you're like, oh, I actually know this person. And
Uh-huh.
I met that person when, you know, I gave my hand when they needed it, you know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a really interesting set of coincidences, I guess.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's just like right place, right time. Because I
Yeah,
mean, you
yeah.
just meet Mark and hey, let's go to Marvel Comics. You're walking around and there's this one character that's frustrated and he kind of turns to you, you know, can you do this? Yeah. You
Yep,
know.
of course. Yeah. Yeah, because my previous job, I was working at a mural company,
Mhm.
and I was just like, I was at the bottom. I was the guy that cleaned all the bathrooms
Mhm.
and stuff like that. You know, I did all the prep work for the real artists. You know,
Mhm.
like I would wash the brushes, I would like prepare the canvases and everything, and then they would where am I going with that? Yeah. So yeah, it was like this crappy existence, you
Mhm.
know. And but I'd watch my boss, who I think was not, he probably was not the greatest businessman,
Mhm.
but he was more of an opportunist, you know. And I think, I don't know if he explained it to me so succinctly. He's like, you know, whatever you say yes,
Mm.
and then you figure it out later. Because basically he would come to us with these like problems and go, hey, I was talking to a guy that's going to pay us a lot of money
Mhm.
to do this job, and I told him we could do it. Can we do it? You know. So
Yeah.
that was his next question. How do we
Yeah.
do this? You know. And I'm like, oh, that's how it works, you know.
Yeah.
So when this guy asked me if I wanted to ink a comic book, I said yes, you know.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know how to do that, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, but Mark's like, I can't believe you just took a job like that. Like, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, yeah, I got it. So like, can you tell me what should I use, a pen
Yeah.
or a brush, you
Mhm.
know, like how do you ink, you know? And he goes, okay, you're going to use this, you're going to use this. And,
Mhm.
you know, I was like, oh, okay. So I started using a brush, And then I found out that Marvel had, for the artists that lived in New York, they could come in and go, hey, can I have this kind of ink or this kind of brush or this kind of pen? And they had a whole room of art supplies for artists. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, I'm in heaven. This is like gonna be, like my other place, they would be like, I don't care, that brush still has 4 strands left, you're gonna keep using it. I'm like, this sucks. But like at Marvel, they were like, no, we want you to have the best stuff so you can make really good comics. And I was like, I didn't know people talk like that, So it was a great time. So.
All right, so Fred, thank you very much, because I think that's going to be the perfect segue to going into Snelson, Comic is Dying. Now, what is the premise of this series?
It's about a sort of a comedian who peaked in the 90s, and he didn't even peak that high. His name is Melville Snelson, and he had a sitcom pilot that wound up not going anywhere. And he tells people that he went on a date with Janine Garofalo, and that's disputed. So this book sort of follows him as he's pursuing different ways to get attention in the comedy world. And it's very much set in the modern time, when you can get a lot of bandwidth by being canceled and then talking about it very loudly to as many people as possible. And so the series sort of just follows him through various levels of fame in the modern times, as he inevitably screws everything up. I think that is that a pitch, Fred? I don't know.
That sounds right. Yeah. If I was in an elevator, I would be like, yeah, you still got 3 more floors. Let's go. Yeah. It was it was really interesting to, cause like it was a perfect storm. Like when Tom Tyre pitched it to me, and I was, I guess Paul had already given him the idea, and then I was doing something for Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Terror, and I had done a couple of stories for them, and thanks to Annie Nocenti, by the way, she's the one that actually got me into Ahoy, and she seems to know, she knows everybody in the comic book world apparently, and so she lives in my neighborhood, and just we hang out and drink together. So
oh my god, I love her so much. I didn't know that. She's her run on Daredevil is one of my all-time favorites. It was such a weird, fun, bizarre run with John Romita Jr. in the 90s. It was so good.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, she's a blast to hang out and talk to, and so yeah, she got me into Ahoy, and then they seemed to like what I was doing, so I was like, well, I could use a little more work, and I asked Tom if he had anything that I could, like any good projects I could do, and he goes, well, I got this one about a comedian. I'm like, oh, I love comedy. Yeah, so this is what's one of my favorite things to watch and hear and listen to, and when I'm not doing art. And yes, next thing you know, there's the Snelson idea that Paul had written, and he goes, yeah, it's set in New York City, it's a comedian. I'm like, oh my god, you're hitting everything that I like, and it's like, has he been stalking me? I think, it's like, this is, and so yeah, it was like one of those really insane, like this, everything lined up, and it was exactly the story I would love to explore, like over and over again, and what, in different scenarios, so.
Tom had asked me. There was a book that Ahoy was doing. One of the first books they were doing was called #Danger, and it's a great comic. It's a very sort of fun, Fantastic Four meets social media sort of riff that was a lot of fun. And they wanted to do a backup comic in it, and Tom said, I want something really sort of realistic and maybe a little dreary to counteract, because the strip was drawn, #Danger was drawn in a very sort of vibrant, cartoony style. Yes. And so I came up with Snelson and pitched him on it. And I mean, Fred came on almost immediately, and I don't know what would have happened to the strip without him, because he really, I'm very far away from New York City, and I don't actually know all that much about stand-up comedy. So Fred really saved the strip. So we did 5 backup issues, backup stories for #Danger that are available free. I don't have the link, but maybe we can put it in the show notes. You can read all of them free on Comixology. And they will hopefully eventually be collected in with this series eventually. But yeah, so we did those 5 issues, and then Tom wanted more, and we were happy to do it. It's like the perfect partner Fred was for this.
And those first like #Danger ones are we use those as like little extra drops in future issues or the present issues that we're doing, and some of the things I did there, I put in the background in the new issues, so you can kind of go, if you're familiar with the old issues, you can go, oh, that's where that character is from, and then Paul will reference something that we did, in that run, and it's really kind of like a fun, like I had one of my friends is totally enjoying all the little background things that I dropped in the present issues that she was familiar with, and she's like, oh, this I like how you did this one and you did this, so
it's becoming its own weird little ecosystem for sure.
Yeah, because we just have characters that we could just do a book on the background characters that we come up with, and because like everything we've come up with are kind of like real characters that could be in the world, and you're like, oh, that's this person's interesting, and then we're just it's in the back of my mind, the Snelson is kind of it's kind of a weird version of Seinfeld in a way, in that when you think of Seinfeld, you're like, oh, Jerry wasn't really the craziest person on there. You had all these other characters that he hung out with that a lot of times the stories were about them, and like I feel like Snelson's characters could do that. It's definitely an ensemble kind of cast, but like Snelson's the main ingredient to all of it, so that's the kind of a cool aspect of it.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit, and because correct me if I'm wrong. So wait a minute. So Snelson has appeared in #Danger as a backup story?
Yeah. Yep. There were five, I think, they were 8 pages, I believe, right?
7. Yeah.
7.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So you can like, there's like a scene, I think, in the 3rd issue, it's kind of loosely based in being in the Comedy Cellar in New York, and a lot of comedy clubs have pictures of like comedians that have come through there. Yes. Oh, Chris Rock played here once, and there's a picture of him, stuff like that. So I have a scene where I put Dave Attell in because he's one of my favorite guys. I see him at the Cellar all the time, and then one of the comedians that surpasses him in those early issues of #Danger, I put her. She has the biggest picture on the wall, just to rub it in that he's a loser, and so things like that, and it was great to be able to put all these little drops in, and we had so much stuff that we could mine from those #Danger issues that I'm like, oh, the vape advertisement. One of the stories is about this guy Snelson blows his opportunity to. This is one of the free ones that's already out, so I'm not. This is not a. Yeah, so
not a spoiler.
Yeah, so he blows his opportunity to have a big lucrative endorsement deal for a big for a vape thing pen, and I drop ads for that in the background in all the new issues, like just rubbing it in that he's still
just taunting him in the background.
Yeah, I am. I do that everywhere. I'm like, I love this character because he's so fun to beat on.
So I'm just gonna ask, since you guys have been working on Snelson for a while, when you guys started when you guys start to do this limited series, are you guys working with a full script, or have you guys got to the point where not a complete script?
I do write a full script, but I mean, there's always the understanding that Fred can do whatever he wants with it. Like I just think, Fred's an incredible artist, and like I'm I think every comic book writer had that like demoralizing moment when they turn like 12 or 13 where they realize I'm never going to be an artist, and it just totally crushes them. And so I think some writers try to overcompensate by over controlling what's on the page, but like Fred is he's a freaking visual genius, so like I'm not going to tell him how to do his job. I write things. The script generally stays the same, but I write it with a full understanding that he's going to make it better in the actual rendering of the art.
Because Fred, before you start, because I know when I read issue, and also too, I got to thank Hannah for the advanced copy of issue 1 that I read. I love the scene where I think I forgot where Snelson and his fellow comedians are at some bar, some comedy club in the South, and this woman's hitting on Snelson, and he's like, "Yeah, hi, honey," and in the background you see, if I'm wrong, you know which one I'm talking about. I see.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite scenes.
Abigail.
Yeah,
and I think and her boyfriend Calvin. I mean, it looked like something happened where, she's ready to punch this one of the drunks or something, and Calvin's like, no, you holding her. It's great. I just love it.
I thought it was fun to like have like background stuff happening, and trying to establish the character. I think Paul mentioned that maybe she's getting into an argument with somebody in the script, and then I was like, oh, let's just have this go through the whole page. And it's supposed to be a weird like comedy subject, comedy as a subject, so I just thought it would be fun to show that she's like this little angry like hothead at first, and then Paul will write her like she's insecure on other times where she's like, are you sure? And then like I'll draw her smaller on the panel on purpose just to make her like feel like, I try to use some of that emotion that you might draw with to express what the character's going through, so like I think also in that issue they're smiling. Is that
that's issue 2
podcast? Yeah, oh my god, issue 2 was great. I know, I know what part you're talking about. That was great,
because I feel like I'm going with the emotion of what might be going on in their head, like no, just smile really big, and I want to just pretend everything's nice and okay, and they're still looking okay, keep smiling, so it was just that kind of emotion that you can have as a character, and I try to identify with it and exaggerate that part of it as much as exaggerate the drawing, so
so
really...
for people who haven't seen it, the scene is they're trying to put up a brave face for some cameras, and they don't think there's microphones, so they're trying to look happy and everything. And I wrote it, their faces are frozen in a smile and they're really uncomfortable. But Fred just made the smiles fly off of their faces in a really surreal way that I never imagined, but of course is like the only way to do that, and it's gorgeous because he did it. But so that's not something I would have ever dreamed of doing, because I'm not an artist the way Fred is. So it's a very collaborative process. And like, if something in the background makes you laugh, odds are good that Fred came up with it entirely on his own. So.
Well, it's like having a good solid script though, because since Paul makes a nice, like, this is what happens in this panel, and this is what everything's like figured out ahead of time, that allows me to go, oh, I can push this here, because like if I didn't have that, then I could probably just derail everything and go way off, but because there's like a nice structure under it, it allows me to like a jazz kind of thing, like, oh, I'm gonna riff off of this and go, but we still come back to that same structure that holds it together. And so that's why I enjoy Paul's scripts, because they're like, they're tight, but he'll say things like the descriptive things for me to read, that like, oh, he says this flippantly or something, and then and when I've learned to read scripts in the manner of like, oh, what else are they saying, in addition to what we're supposed to draw, and that way it makes it like you can get more out of it. And if I'm trying to do more, it's going to be better, hopefully. So like, it's like, why just do the simple thing, which is why it takes so long to do these. I'm like, I have slowed down so much over the years, but I used to be able to pencil and ink things, like I was pencil and inking like 1 or 2 pages a day, when I was doing Marvel and DC. But the backgrounds didn't matter so much. It wasn't as intricate of the story. It didn't matter. I could have done things like that, but it would have taken too long. And now they didn't. They gave me 5 issues, and they were like, yeah, we don't. There's not really a deadline. We're gonna see what you do, how much you turn in, and then we'll schedule it. And I'm like, oh, this is the best working, because and you guys are really nice, and you like, just you haven't said anything about like how I handled this or that. You're I try, and then as I went, I realized how much freedom I had, and I was like, oh, now I can really push this, and everybody seemed to be happy with it. But I mean, I'm used to editorial magazine illustration. They'll be like, hey, can you fix this hand? And like, can you, like, they'll nitpick everything, and I'm like, well, okay, so I fix that and I fix this, so I'm used to that, but in comic books, they're just like, well, it's right in front of me, I guess that's what we get. I'm like, I mean, I could fix things if you want me to, it's not that hard. But yeah, giving that, when you have that, I realize when you have that freedom, it allows you to like think outside the box a little more, and explore something that, like, well, normally I wouldn't try this if somebody was really breathing down my neck, but because they're not, I'm like, I'm gonna try it and see what happens, and now and usually once you get in that rhythm, it comes out great, and because I'm really happy with everything that we were able to do together. So yeah,
because I'm going back to that scene where Snelson and Calvin are smiling because that one guest that they're hoping for canceled on the podcast, and he's got that quote unquote YouTube filmmaker. And I love it when the smile is just like, okay, just keep smiling, and it just grows outrageous. And to me, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I love that to me, I think some of your caricature art style really works. You know,
Oh yeah.
I was like, that was great, because we don't see that in comics. You know.
Yeah.
For me,
Usually, if you're realistic, you tend to stay realistic in everything, and you try to, whereas like I feel like doing a story, you want to kind of push. I like the emotional side of it too, So I feel like it's nice to be able to where it makes sense to do that, So you can't just do it for doing its sake. You have to. It has to, because I haven't done that, since. I mean, I haven't done that before in a comic, and and it made sense to do it there. And,
Paul, I'm going to ask you, where did the name Melville Snelson, where did that name come from?
Well, let me see. I had a boss who I didn't like, who really hated the name Snelson. Snelson is a last name. It's not super common. But like he hilariously hated the name Snelson and would like rant about it. It came up a fair amount for reasons that I won't go into here. And and I've rarely seen a name get that kind of reaction out of someone. So I figure, like personally, I don't feel that like hatred towards it, but I figure if it gets a rise out of someone that much, then it's worth investigating. So yeah, it really stuck in my head as noteworthy. And the Melville, I wanted something sort of literary and sort of self-important for a first name, and so I was, like, I was looking at Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I was looking around, and I just liked the way the Mel and the Snell played together, and it's the name sort of sounds like a curse a little bit. Melville Snelson. It's like got a real just saying it sort of as one piece sort of puts you in the mindset that I think of when I think of him. So it sort of all echoed together. Yeah.
Okay. For both of you guys, who came up with the design for Snelson? Who came up with
that was all Fred. I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you go into it.
I start with you gave me a couple of comedians you kind of was thinking about. I think Mark Maron and David Cross, and you mentioned a couple of those, and then I because it's a realistic kind of based thing that we were doing, I felt like I should come up with a distinct look of a normal person, so I met this guy that was like, he's this old crazy guy, and he had a wisp of white hair that defied gravity and logic on his head, and he was mostly bald, but he had this weird hair on top of his head, and I'm like, well, I've remembered it for years. This is like back in college, and so I'm like, I have to use that. And then I'm like, well, he's got to be soulful, so he's gonna have a soul patch of white, like he just has that white streak in his hair, so because the rest of his hair is black, or dark brown, and so he just has that one little spot that's holding on for dear life in the front of his head, and then he has his soul patch. And if you break it down into simple like lines, it would be like an exclamation point, like a little dot, and then boom, on top of his head. And from a distance, you'll always notice that, So like if I do a long shot of this character, where he is, because you can see that, and and it's a natural occurring thing. So I felt like that's like I want to do something that'll be distinct from a long point of view and also interesting up close. So that's where it came from.
And it worked out well that Fred and I are about the same age, because I would have hated to have to explain like wallet chains and like the weird short lengths of the 90s and stuff that Snelson wears, but Fred understood all that stuff, so I didn't have to. I can't imagine trying to explain to like a 22-year-old artist 1990s fashion, because it was just so disgusting.
Yeah, there's a comedian called Big J Okerson that has the wallet chain, and but he's probably 40 something, so he's early 40s. So I don't, and he's from Philadelphia, so he's got the look from the 90s, I think, that I was thinking of. Because like he even has the fingerless gloves, and yeah, and he's funny as hell. So
so I'm going to ask, why use comedy? And I don't know if I'm using this phrase correctly, but like as a backdrop to this story, why not have Snelson in politics or journalism?
Well, there is a journalist character who comes up a fair amount, who I get to use to sort of talk about my feelings about journalism in the modern day. So there is that. But as to why comedy, I think it's because I really wanted to talk about what I saw people in my generation talking about when it came to like, the idea of cancel culture and free speech and, being silenced and things like that in response to Me Too, and in response to Black Lives Matter and different, as a, cis white male, I've seen a lot of my sort of peers go overboard in response to losing, like, not losing their platform, but having to share like a millimeter of the spotlight with people who are not white men, right? And so I wanted to do a comic that was about that, and to me, comedy was always just right up at the forefront of that conversation, right? There are a lot of comedians who now make a living doing this, talking about being silenced on podcast after podcast and going on tour and talking about how silenced they are and things like that. So comedy is sort of at the intersection of all of these things. So it seemed like the place to, where it would be easiest to touch at all these sort of like issues that are in the zeitgeist right now, to sort of intersect with all of those in the easiest way. And then I was very lucky that Fred was very knowledgeable about these things, because I know a couple of stand-up comedians, but I never did stand-up or anything like that. So I was really glad to have someone with his expertise come on.
And Fred, how did you like contribute or add to this part?
It's just I think Paul and I are kind of similar on the same ideas about it, and I followed a lot of. I've been following comedy. I started going to like the comedy places in 1991 when I got here. Even in college I was going to in Ohio, and so I've watched like Andrew Dice Clay was when he came out. And Sam Kinison, those guys were like monsters in the 80s, and they were rude, and and their acts would totally be like not even get a start if in today's society, and I've seen everything change that Paul is talking about, and so yeah, it's like when I go back now because of YouTube, and I look at like Bill Hicks and people like that, and I'm like, oh, this is really incredible. George Carlin, they all like start, like when they all start, and the nice thing, the metaphor of a comic, commenting on today's society, it makes sense to me. It's like it's the jester you know, in the Shakespeare play, going, hey, you know, see, Hamlet sucks, doesn't he? You know, he's being an asshole here, and then, you know, but you don't really, you know, he's making fun of the king or somebody.
Yeah.
You know, that's it, traditionally. That's the guy that could get away with it without getting his head cut off right away, and in a way that's really cool how we're doing it, you know. And so yeah, I mean, I just try to support what Paul is doing,
Mm-hmm.
and go with it, and try to add to it where I can. So
Mm-hmm.
but he's doing the most of the creative part of like inventing the character and inventing like the story, and going, oh, it makes sense to have him walk through that door and not like use a sledgehammer to go through, you know. But I like sledgehammers, you know. No. But you know, so but Paul will give me an actual story that makes sense, and I'm like, yeah, I will go with that.
Now for this question, I'm like I said, I'm kind of joking on this part. Now, without naming names, is Snelson based on a comedian or a combination of comedians?
For me, he's based on a combination of comedians. I think that you know, Fred's already mentioned David Cross is one. David Cross's 1990s stuff is very like, you know, sort of in your face, angry man sort of a thing. And so that's a base of it. In the second issue, when he gets into podcasting, there's a little more Mark Maron and things like that, but no one particular comedian. It's, for me anyway, it's and to be clear, like when we're talking about David Cross, I'm talking about like David Cross only like 40% less funny, right? So like it's very important that whatever comedian he's reflecting, he's not as good as that comedian. So yeah, that's for me. I don't know. Fred, do you have any other comedians who are your sort of inspiration?
Not, yeah, those are the ones for that character anyway. But yeah, I just, because like it's more, you know, comedy's more about like what you actually say as a joke and your opinions. So to me, that's more the comedy, and what he looks like is kind of like, well, he actually looks like my third floor neighbor, because that's who posed for him most of the time. And I you know, I told my neighbor, he's like right age group, he's like 54. I go, hey, I got this character. He's a washed up comedian, and he's an asshole. And do you want to model for him? And so, and my neighbor's awesome. He's just like, yeah, man, what do you want? You know, and also fuck you. You know, and I was like, all right. So it was awesome. He just, every time I went down there, I go like, I need some expressions. He's like, how about this? You know, and he'd get into it, you know, and he's like a lighting director. That's not even his, you know, he's like, I'm just messing around, you know. So, but yeah, he's a blast to talk to, and you know, he was totally into the character, and you know, he's like, it doesn't exactly look like him, but you know, it's pretty close, you know. You can see it if you're looking.
This is an off-the-cuff question, and I am just purely joking. So, Fred, is your neighbor going to get a cut out of this? A cut of a percentage?
Oh, he totally expects one. You know, he's like, yeah, you know, if you leave anything out that you outside of your door, I'm stealing it. You know, so I'm like, all right, you know, so I'll leave the good stuff. You know.
Are you going to bring him to comic book conventions when you guys are promoting Snelson?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to give him some glasses. He doesn't wear glasses, so I'm like, yeah, I have to give him the glasses, and I'm like, well, we're going to have to shave a bald spot in your head. Is that okay? And he's like, okay. You know. He's like, will it get me the chicks? You know? So yeah, that's what he'll do. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to continue on. So in issue 1, you know, I know there are a couple panels with cows in there. Now, were the cows a symbol of something? Like for me, I don't know. I just thought it was like somehow or another, you know, people are being herded like cattle for something. Or am I just reading too much into it?
No. I mean, the cows came up a lot, and that was one of the things that it was a big theme in that issue, because I actually have heard comedians refer to, especially like jaded, tired comedians, refer to the audience as like looking at them like cows, like their eyes, and their eyes are sort of have that wet glow to them, and they're like some comedy clubs, they're like chewing on their food, and they're like got this slack jawed sort of a thing going. And so that always sort of struck me as an image. I think a lot of comedians who are really unhappy with where they are probably think of their audience as like, ruminants and things like that. So so yeah, that's I think basically it was just a way to get into Snelson's mindset a little bit.
For listeners, if you guys haven't picked up the first issue, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like towards the end, there's a couple panels that Fred drew that the audience eyes were cows, cow eyes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was like I that's one of those things you pick up on. They're like, I think Paul was like, yeah, it's kind of like they're looking at them like cow-eyed. I'm like, I'm just gonna make them cows, and I'm like, I'm gonna go with it and exaggerate it, and because I thought, it was it was an important moment for him,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, oh, that I wanted to make sure everybody knew this is a significant moment, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to step out of reality for a second, and
Mm-hmm.
the audience is going to be a bunch of cows, and yeah, so this is like, I feel like it made its point better that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so I'm slowly wrapping things up, guys. So now I know issue 1, Snelson, his platform was a comedy stage. I know in issue 2, he's like he has a podcast, and that's kind of like his stage to express himself. Now, again, am I reading too much into this? Do these have like deeper meanings of what is really going on in Snelson's life? Am I wrong, or?
Well, for me, I wanted to address the fact, like I said, that I think that that the people who talk about being silenced keep getting larger and larger platforms to talk about being silenced.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and every issue is, every Snelson story we've done, it's sort of like a skipping stone. We touch on different points in his life.
Yes.
Usually a significant amount of time has passed in between each issue, and he's
Mm-hmm.
changed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I just wanted to address different ways that people communicate, and different platforms and things like that, because I think there's just there are a lot of different ways to look at the issue of of cancel culture, and of wanting a platform. And so that was my thinking, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because yeah, like I said, I was, but and then the other thing too, like that's pretty good. And and the other thing you mentioned too, that's right, because from issue 1 to issue 2, it's like, I'm not trying to spoil it. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's like all of issue 1, I was expecting to see what happens after that, but then it's like already he's doing a podcast. So I was kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what about that thing that ended in issue 1, but now it's coming. But I also see the ending of issue 2. What happened, or the results?
Yeah, we go back and address it a little bit in the story, what happened specifically at the end of issue 1. But it's I also think, we probably could have done a 5-issue series about Snelson starting a podcast and getting it off the ground, but I don't think that would have been especially interesting. So I like to, I like the skipping forward and playing with time in the narrative a little bit. And plus, it allows, in almost every issue, he goes through a pretty significant physical change. Like in the second issue, he has a beard, and
yeah.
And Fred does a great job with like making him recognizable, but still, still changing to the. And I just thought that was really interesting, because I think, if you look back at your photos of your life, I'm sure you had different, maybe the Mohawk phase or
everyone.
Not judging you, but it's like I'm really interested in taking a character and just having him go through all these different permutations and you know, seeing it's still the same person, but they're trying on different sort of persona all the time. And I think Fred did a really amazing job of sort of following that and keeping him on model, but still experimenting with the ways that he presented to the world.
Fred, do you want to add anything?
Oh no, that's pretty much I was at that same approach, trying to use, like, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, because like there's another scene in another book that we do that where he's like looking back at young Snelson, you know, and it's like, you know, like, wow, what did he look like then? You know, like that's going to be an interesting one too, you know, and you know, less lines on the face. So I went with that, and same glass, you know, I try to, you have to keep certain things so people recognize it, but you know, yeah, like what if he gets turned into a toad, you know, then I'm like, well, you know, that toad's going to have the glasses and a strange wisp of hair for no reason on, you know, and you know, so you try to figure out like those distinct things that carry through no matter what happens to the character. You know? So like I had a character once where I designed this really nice elaborate costume for the person, you know, the character, and like I didn't know that the writer had planned to like burn this off in about 3 pages. You know, it was before I got the script, so I didn't know what was going to happen to this character, but I'm like, oh, I'm going to make her look really cool and badass, and you know, so like 3 pages in, like she's in a firefight, and her coat that I spent like a day designing, you know, trying to figure this thing out. I'm like, oh, this is going to be cool. Pulled off, ripped up, shredded. And I'm like, oh man, you know. So I try to, you know, I'm like, now at least the rest of that character was designed, you know, distinct enough where it's like, oh, you know, you still recognize it afterwards. But I was like, oh, I spent so much time on this, and just to have it last 3 pages, you know. So yeah.
All right. So now this part, I'm just gonna, you know, just kind of, I'm gonna put it where it's like, I'm gonna say that, you know, I know for Snelson, I know some readers may say that this book is for them, and then this book is not, you know, for them. You know, there's gonna be someone that, for both you guys, what is the one thing you guys want the readers to walk away, you know, after this limited series is over?
I don't know if I have any one thing I want a reader to walk away with. I hope that, you know, that something in it made them laugh, and ideally something made them think also. But you know, like I've talked to people who have very different understandings of cancel culture, for instance, and they took something completely different from the parts of the book they've read so far. And I think that's cool. You know, the only thing I would be really upset, and I think that we both worked pretty hard on this, is I didn't want some of the more regressive comics people to take this as like a statement. You know, I didn't want Snelson to be anyone's hero, right? So like it was very important that we don't make him somebody's you know, we didn't, I my nightmare would be to have somebody come up to me and go, man, Snelson is my hero, I want to be just like him, or something like that. So that's the only thing that I don't want to hear from anyone. And I feel like if I do, then I've failed at my job as a writer. But I mostly you know, I would love to just like hear what people had to say about it, and talk to them about it, because we've been working on this for so long, and we worked through the pandemic, and it was delayed a little bit because of the pandemic, because we were waiting for comic book stores to get back up and running again. So like we've been holding on to this for so long, and I'm just excited when people read it, and even if they don't like some of the script or something like that, because I think it's impossible to not like the art, like at least they're experiencing it, and I'd love to talk to them about it. So that's my long and rambling answer. Fred?
No.
Yeah, it's because it's nice to. I hopefully it's the beginning of a dialogue that they'll be carrying out, when they see it in real life, because we were just reflecting what we've observed, and then we're able to go, this is kind of a significant thing that's happening in our lives right now, and the world's complicated, like there's no one direction, one easy answer, and and I feel like always look in the background. There's always something else there, and so there's a lot of we drop a lot of things in there, and I try to drop a lot of things in the backgrounds in the book as well, and I think if you look at between the art and the words, and you go, oh, there's a lot more. I think we were able to say a lot more than a simple telling of a story. I feel like hopefully they'll walk away with more questions to ask themselves. Immortality. Yeah, that's it.
Well, I'm gonna say this, and I think you guys saw my email last night that I love the series. I do.
Thanks.
I'm gonna, and the first issue, Paul, your writing is great because the character of Snelson, he's off-putting, and the scary thing is I recognize that character in, he's someone in my family, he's someone at my church, but he's recognizable, he's relatable. In the second issue, he's he gets, it's a little bit more he's a little bit more real, because to me, and you guys saw my notes, that basically it's just he's just trying to make a mark in the world. He just he's a human being who wants to his big break passed by, and and he just wants to make sure someone remember, kind of like I said, leave a mark on the world, and not in a, he just wants, that's what I see. But like I said, I love it, I love it.
Like every artist that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Like every artist that, writer, artist, performer, they're, if you're not like, it's for like, say you're an atheist, right? You don't believe in God or anything. You still think about like what will happen after I'm gone, so as an artist, you're like, this is my shot of immortality. And so that's what Snelson kind of is like. I wanted to be remembered. I want the accolades too, but and he's selfish enough, like he's probably simplistic enough where he's like, no, I just want to be famous, kind of, like that, but he's also in the back of your mind as an artist, you're kind of like, this is my shot at immortality. If I do something significant that people will remember and talk about, and we're telling his story as as our hope to be immortal. So that's an interesting idea, I think, when you think about why you do art and what it's for and who's going to remember it. And so
that kind of fame, I think, is I don't think it's a bad thing to want to be remembered, or to want to make your mark or anything like that, but I think that there are some people who don't care how they get remembered or how they make their mark, as long as they do it. And that's where it gets toxic and weird and all that. And that's sort of what Snelson is wrestling with in this issue, because he is, or in this series, because he is, he's getting older and he's aware that things have sort of passed him by, and so he's you're right, he's trying to make his mark on the world, but there are lots of different ways that you can do that, and not all of them. In fact, most of them probably aren't that great. So
a lot of
so
them involve shit and vomit.
Yes.
So
literally sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's that's a very good reading. I think it's one of the major issues with the book. I think.
All right, so okay, I'm slowly wrapping this up. I'm going to ask some lighter questions about the series. Okay, so I'm joking on this part. You guys keep mentioning Janine Garofalo's name in the series. Do any of you guys know her?
I do not know her.
No, but I was just at a comedy club the other day, and this guy's like, I gave him a Snelson book, and he read something about us joking that this character knows Janine Garofalo, and he goes, she might be playing here in a couple of days if you want to come back. And I'm like, really, I don't know if I should meet her, because like this, it might not be a good idea. Not that we do anything bad, but.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'd love a blurb if you're out there, Janine. If you want to blurb the book, please.
If you do want to make an appearance, I can shoot some reference, and yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I had such a crush on her growing up. Oh my God, in the 90s, she was like my ideal. Date, I think, and I think that's why she's Snelson's, because she, in the 90s, she was she's amazing. Yeah, and she still is amazing, but it's it's very much of the time and all that. But no, neither of us know her. Okay. Sorry.
I mean, because the truth about cats and dogs. Oh my God, I loved her in that movie. I think she did a couple of others, there's a Bill Murray one she did with an elephant he had to bring cross country with.
Yes, Larger Than Life.
That's it.
Underrated movie. Bill Murray and an elephant. You can't go wrong.
Okay, so Fred, you've already mentioned she's not going to make a cameo in this book, all right?
I don't think so, but I would love to put her in. Yeah. But I have seen her perform once at Michael Ian Black. He's a comedian. He was doing a pilot episode, and somebody gave me a ticket to go see that, and I was in the front row, and she was part of that show, and did I forget, I barely remember it at this point. It was like one of those game show type things, and we were told as an audience to, you gotta do this, and now you gotta do that, and so we had to perform too, in a way, clap here, clap there, shut up there, so it wasn't quite a real performance, but she was there. I saw her in person, so we dated back in the 90s, briefly, we had a cup of coffee, so it was
All right, now my other question is, how did you guys get legendary artist Sergio Aragonés to do that awesome variant cover for issue 2? How did you guys get that? Or how?
Magic.
That was all Tom. Yeah, Tom Pyre magic. He is magic. Yeah. I don't know, and I wept. It was as a Gru the Wanderer fan growing up. It was really incredible, and we were really excited too to get Peter Bagg to do the variant cover for issue 1 too, because his comic Hate is sort of. I feel like this comic is a little bit in conversation with those sort of 90s angry young man comics. So that was amazing. And of course, Sergio Aragonés, it's like having Jack Kirby draw, Snelson, which would also be pretty weird. But
I know what you mean.
I mean, he's the Jack Kirby of humor comics, I think, basically. And so, I'm still blown away by it.
Me too. I was, yeah, when I got the sketch that Tom shared with us for this, I'm like, oh my gosh, he got the character, and that's something that I was part of the design of that character, and it's so weird because like my first influences was Mad Magazine, when I was like, that was one of my first, I don't know, I don't know if that one counted as a comic book or what, but like, I was like, once I started reading, it was Mad Magazine, and all of his little corners, little border things were my favorite, things of Mad Magazine, and him, Jack Davis, and Mort Drucker were like, those are my art gods back then. So.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, like Tom just sent us the sketch out of the blue. Like we didn't know he was working on it or anything. It just like showed up. So I thought it was a practical joke at first.
Exactly.
It's totally Tom Pirate magic.
All right. So I'm slowly wrapping this up. Favorite convention moments, either as a fan or as a creator?
Every time I run into Mark Teixeira, he's usually drawing somebody or something, and I don't know if people realize that, like, he's usually the last person to leave a convention, because like he'll like run into a security guard that was or somebody or a janitor, like somebody who's a big fan from like something in the 90s, and he's like, oh, let me do a little drawing for you, and then he'll do like a little head drawing for people, as a gift to like all the workers that, not all, but, a few here and there. And, that's why he's always the last person to leave, but you can find him really easy because he's laughing his ass off at something and everybody's screaming, and, that's still there. And those are my favorite times when I run into Mark Teixeira at any convention. So.
And for me, I mean, as a writer, my first comics panel at Emerald City Comic Con with Ahoy was pretty special, not just because it was my first panel, but because it was, it was with Tom and Mark Russell, who's, even before I started working with him at Ahoy, he's my favorite current comics writer and still is. And so that was just like a total fanboy moment for me. And then I've been lucky to have a lot of interactions sort of, where I just run into people. Like I had a great conversation with Mike Mignola when there was like nobody in line behind me at Emerald City Comic Con. It was really weird that like nobody was flooding him. So we just hung out and talked for a while, and it was great. I had meeting David Nakayama, who, as I said, is like just a total sweetheart, who drew covers for Planet of the Nerds. And I was at this isn't a comics convention, but I was at a Book Expo America convention as a bookseller in LA, and Stan Lee was there. And it was a panel, and this was before Iron Man was a movie or anything like that. It was a big hall in a convention center in Los Angeles, and there were like 5 people in the audience.
Oh God!
And wow. Stan Lee. It was like, you can't even imagine this now. But I got to go up and shake his hand afterwards and everything, and he was just like, he was entirely Stan Lee. It was a pretty neat interaction to just like, shoot the shit with him after an unsuccessful panel in Los Angeles. So, it's those sorts of things that you can't plan for, that just happen, that I think make conventions.
Oh yes.
It's why I miss conventions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. All right. Have you guys been to Hawaii?
I have not, but I hear it exists. It's somewhere west. That's all I know.
I have not been. In fact, my wife and I had tickets to go right before the pandemic, and so we still have not been. I'd rather not go during the pandemic. I know a lot of people from the mainland are going there during the pandemic, and I think that's awful. And so I don't want to do that. So once it's safe, we will definitely be going. You're not on the Big Island, are you? I hear there was a volcano eruption today there.
I'm on Oahu. No, yeah, it's But what's nice, at least it's I can't even think of the crater's name. But it's not that bad. The eruption is in an area where there's no one endangered, or it's not any houses that's going to be damaged or anything like that. Yeah. But it's pretty spectacular at night, especially if you see pictures of it at night. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Free light show. Yeah, that's is it the eruption that's like shooting stuff really high, or is it the flowing kind?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sure, because I just been hearing some of the news reports. I heard some of it is like it's a little bit shooting up. It's not that bad. It's not the flowing, but then it's hard to tell because we don't know if there's one of the actual lava tubes, or if it's moving underground too. That's always a hard thing to tell. But yeah,
you can tell you've grown up there, because you're like, there's a volcano like in the vicinity is blowing up, but I don't know, I hear about it, but like, I mean, if I had a volcano blow up within 100 miles of me, I'd be like, what the hell?
Okay, I'm going to start wrapping this up. Again, can you guys promote your social media platforms again?
Yeah,
sure.
At Paul Constant on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, F Harper or FredHarper.com, and Dead Red Fred on Twitter and Instagram.
Any last words to our listeners?
Aloha. 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 Yeah, how do they say it? What's my British accent? Aloha. Aloha. There. I'm sorry. Inside joke from earlier. That's me.
Yeah.
That's my, yeah.
No, I just want to say, thanks for listening. I hope you read the book, and I'd like to know what you think. And it's I think that's it.
And if you buy enough Snelson issues, like you should get, it takes about, I would say about 30 books, and you can prop up a corner of a couch with them, so, and then order 31 so you have one to read once you've propped the couch up, and you go like, hey, I'm sitting on some Snelson right now, so get your, and then there's 5 issues, so you'll have like you have enough for each corner,
a whole couch and a wonky chair.
Yeah, possibly a really bad pillow. So.
All right, Paul and Fred, we're going to end it on that note.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
I wish you guys all the success for the Snelson series. And mahalo. Thank you for your time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you guys. Again, like I said, just thank you very much.
Mahalo. Thank you so much.
Mahalo. Thank you very much. It's nice to meet you.
If you are a new reader to comics or a lifelong comics fan, please check out Snelson. Comedy is Dying. Issue 3 comes out in stores, and like I always said, or it may be out already, depending when you listen to this episode. It comes out on August 13th. Again, I want to give a big mahalo to Hannah. Thank you, Hannah, for setting this interview up. And Hannah, like I said, you are a lifesaver. Thank you very much. I also want to thank Drew, the host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. And Drew, thank you for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys, aloha.